Today we have Imani Olear. She serves currently as a senior pastor of Reformation Lutheran Church in the heart of Rochester. She is the founder of Yoga for a Good Hood, Inc., which we will talk about, and the co-owner of TruYoga in the South Wedge. And you've also wrote a book. What's your book called?
True Identity.
True Identity. I just added that in because I remember that Catherine, my wife, read it.
Yes.
And she can be found on Instagram at Yoga for a Good Hood or True Yoga Rochester. Both of those spots. Imani, how are you today?
I am beautiful. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. First thing I want to ask you that I ask everybody is let us know one thing about you that is like a guilty pleasure that people might not even know, even your friends.
Well, I'm pretty much an open book.
Okay.
However, like one things that people are surprised about that I really love watching Hee Haw reruns and and listening to country music.
Okay, what is Hee Haw reruns? Somebody in our audience might know. I have no idea.
So Hee Haw was a show in the 70s.
Okay.
And it's just a really terrible show. It's really obnoxious, and it depicts persons of country music in a very really poor form. But back then it was like Minnie Pearl, Johnny Cash got his, you saw him there, Willie Nelson. Yeah, so they just do bits and skits, kind of like Carol Burnett, but country.
Okay. And this can be found on Netflix?
No. I may have CDs of them still.
Or VHS?
Well, no, they've made them into DVDs.
Okay.
And so I just put it into my computer, and the theme song goes, hee haw. And then it goes, hee haw, ha, 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 ha. And it's a donkey doing that. So that's my guilty pleasure.
Fair enough. I love it. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Well, as we know, this podcast is called Mindful Impact. Mm-hmm. So the first question I want to ask you, Imani, is what do you do for mindfulness, meditation, yoga? What do you do, and how do you practice that?
Well, one of the first things that I did as soon as I sat down on the seat, before I opened my mouth, I spread the bottom of my heels and the soles of my feet, and I lifted up to find that grounding, so that I could remind my body that I am here right now and nowhere else. And so that's the practice. I have all kinds of other things, right? So other formats, things, techniques in which I do, but to bring my body into this present moment is always what I'm trying to remember to do.
I love that. And people can use that when they're coming into meetings, big presentations, anything like that, to center themselves. Does that kind of get rid of some nerves too, if you're going to speak on stage or anything like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you'll find me, I'll take my shoes off always, wherever I may be. I sometimes preach barefoot, particularly in difficult topics, so that I can just get grounded and feel the earth underneath me and the sky above me.
That's beautiful. I know I did. So I took Imani's class this morning, actually with Catherine, and I loved it. We did a lot of that grounding. You talked a lot about spreading your skin on the bottom of your feet, which I thought was so cool.
Thank you.
Because, technically you can't actually spread but if you put your mind into it and bring it, that's awesome. I loved that, by the way.
It's energetic.
Yeah, totally. There was a lot of energy in that room today. So appreciate you leading us in on that. So do you have a daily meditation practice too that you do?
My hope is that I have a daily meditation practice.
I have to ask.
And some days I don't.
Yeah.
And then I gather myself back in and then find it. Right. So my plan is always to wake up, and first I do a meditation.
Ooh.
And so meditation is I just lay there for a moment and go, oh, I opened my eyes. That's good. Right. And just a little bit of gratitude for that. Yeah. And then I place my feet on the floor and go into my meditation space in a separate room. But there are days when, like today, my alarm didn't go off. Mm-hmm. And it's like, open my eyes. It's it's not gratitude. It's like, oh God, I gotta go, go, go.
Yeah.
And then I have to find space before, because otherwise it just spirals.
Yes.
And then, like right before I taught today, I just got into my feet and did a little meditation.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I have those kind of days too. And sometimes I kind of get upset with my, I'm like, why, I should get it done right away in the morning, but the alarm didn't go off, or I decided to press this, snooze one extra time. So I'm really glad that you actually talked about that. That's okay not to beat ourselves up over stuff like that. I know,
Right.
but it's a total thing that we have to keep reminding ourselves, right?
Well, I tell people, like, don't should all over yourself, right?
Actually,
Right. Like in all the shoulds that we give is actually counter to the principle of the 8 limbs. And one of the 8 limbs, ahimsa, which means nonviolence. And the things that we say to ourselves are so violent, right? There are things I would never say to the worst person that, like, I'm having all kinds of negative energy towards, right? I wouldn't say, oh, you suck, right? But we go, oh, I suck.
So true.
Right? We do violence to ourselves constantly.
Yeah. So that's that inner self-talk. That's one of the things that if there was a couple topics that I would love to talk about on a stage is that inner talk.
Yeah.
That self-talk that we have, because there's no one else we're having more conversation with each day than ourselves. So that's interesting, the way the perspective you just brought up of you wouldn't say it to somebody else. So why would you say it to yourself?
Right.
I love that.
Right.
That was awesome. Let's get into you do a lot of different things, okay? And you wear many hats.
Yeah.
All amazing. I mean, you guys, if you want to surround yourself and be friends with somebody that's an amazing human, that's Imani right here herself. I know it's just doing so much for the community, for people in general. I want to ask you, like, what would you say you're most proud of over the last, let's say, 10 years that you've either accomplished yourself or done for others? Something you're most proud of in the last 10 years?
Yeah. So Yoga for a Good Hood was founded in May 2013.
Okay.
So that is a joy. And the reason why it's such a joy for me and so proud of it is that, like, I did it with my daughter. Like, she was, like, behind the scenes helping me do things, or my son. Like, it became a family affair kind of unknowingly, like, right? Like, when I, like, look back. And so to give that back to the community, and then to, like, see this evolution of it, to, like, I'm so proud to be a part of some initial conversations of access for our community. Like, that people are like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should think about this. And I do think it's like the first person who wore a jerry curl, right?
Right.
Like, they, like, started a whole thing of jerry curls,
Yeah.
which in the community, are the first person that wore plaid, and it became a trend. I think Yoga for a Good Hood in the community of Rochester began to bring awareness to what was missing in our community.
And what is that? Like, explain that a little more.
What is missing is a lot of times what you don't see is persons of color in our yoga studios. And so I look around and I go, I don't see myself reflected back to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm always like, well, why? And it's not that people don't do yoga, like, of all backgrounds.
Right.
But why do persons of color in some places not feel comfortable? I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
It's just like for TruYoga, for example.
Yes.
TruYoga has signs in the current location that says they're handicap accessible, but there's 2 steps. That doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
Right? Like, you can't even get in.
Right.
So for me, then we start solving that problem. Then I need to eliminate the 2 steps. And so for Yoga for a Good Hood, which I'm just so passionate about, is what has been the 2 steps for persons of color and persons of poverty, for how can they get access? And so we created this, pay what you can if you can, right?
Yeah.
See yourself reflected back to you. And so that's what has been missing in many studios. And I ask the question of every studio. It's not like it's not a judgment on any studio whatsoever, because everybody's doing the best they can with what they can. But I'm just going to ask the question, why am I not seeing me in this room?
And that's beautiful. I love that you're doing that. How, like, my curious question is, and in regards to that is the answers you get from handicapped individuals, persons of color. Mm-hmm. What kind of, I'm sure you ask them and talk to them. What are their feelings when you say, obviously you've gone through it too, but feelings towards why they're not going or why they don't feel like, I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to ask here?
Yes. Yeah. It ranges the gamut, right? Some of it is perception. Some of it is a perception of that they wouldn't be welcome there.
Okay.
Because one time I was teaching at a studio, and I was subbing a class. And a gentleman who was a person of color walked in, and he did a double take and looked at me. And I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And he was like, "Are you the teacher?" I go, "Yeah." He's like, shut up. Shut up. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." He was like, and like the whole class, he was going, I just didn't even know that. I just didn't even know that there was another black person here. And I'm like, right? Because we don't see each other.
Was that one of your first?
That was one of my first encounters at that studio. Oh, wow. And I just was kind of like, interesting. Right? Like I knew.
Was he black too?
Yes.
Interesting.
Like, so, and one of the things culturally with persons of color, we look for each other in a room.
Okay.
Right?
Makes sense.
Because as a minority, typically what ends up happening, we scan the room, look for like. Because it's safety, because of different traumas and abuses that has been experienced in different people's lives. I'm not saying that's universal, but it's pretty much true. And you can see people, like maybe if you are a Bills fan.
Yeah.
Aha.
I am a Bills fan.
I know you are, my friend. You look for the Bills fan in a room full of people that may have Patriot shirts on, which they could all go away, right?
Totally. I agree with that.
Right, but you look for them. You look for people that have some likeness.
Well, look, if I'm going to, let's say I went to a studio and it was all black people and I'm going to look for the white person in that room. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yes, you're looking for commonality.
Yes, I totally understand. Yeah.
And so if in media portrayals, I don't see anyone. On social media, I don't see anyone. In any of your literature, I don't see anyone. Then I'm going to assume, right or wrong, that that's not a place for me. So my question to persons who own businesses is, make sure you're just including everybody at the table. So at Yoga for a Good Hood, one of the things that I'm proud of is that we try to include many diverse images to let people see. Or Maxine, who isn't black, but she signs so that someone who has hearing impairment, they know they're okay there. Yeah, it's just expanding the picture.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's beautiful. I love people like yourself that do that stuff. I mean, because the transition of deciding I'm going to do this, it takes a lot of courage because you have to exert a lot of energy, a lot of time into that on top of everything else you have. Yeah. Right. So for you doing that, you have to have a real passion for it. So I know that this Yoga for a Good Hood is going to take off and it's going to be awesome. And I know that for the past 5 years, I've been seeing it all over the place. So so I'm grateful that you do things like that. I had a doctor on a couple weeks ago, and he quit his practice of handing out different prescriptions, like candy, he said, to go more of a holistic approach because he wanted to help others. We took a huge pay cut. He had to do so. These leaps of faith that you take, like yourself, is amazing, and we need more of that in the world. So that's awesome.
Thank
I did. So you were on TED Talks. Take a little shift here. TEDx Talks, right?
Yes.
I do have a couple questions with that I think people would be interested in. But one of the quotes when I was listening to it, I want you to say it. I'm not going to say it. And it starts with, "May the suffering ones."
May the suffering ones be suffer free. May the fear struck be fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief. Yeah.
I loved that. If that's been something that stuck with you for many years, and you say that on a daily basis kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's a part of a practice of meditation called metta meditation.
Yes.
And so metta meditation, I discovered almost accidentally. I was in Arizona, and my husband and I were walking, probably going to go get a beer somewhere, go watch the Arizona Cardinals play, something. And we were walking, and carved into the cement of, like, when wet cement, like we all do, like you want to put your handprint in.
Oh, yeah.
Someone wrote, "May all beings be happy and free." And I said, whatever. Some people don't need to be happy or free because they're jerks. Like, right? Like I had that inner dialogue and judgment. And there was almost like this flick on the back of my head. And whenever that happens, that's usually the universe for me. Spirit, whatever you call it, saying, how arrogant of you, daughter, to think that everyone cannot be happy and free. And so I looked up that statement, and it's a part of metta, which is also a part of that opening quote. It is the hope that people no longer have suffering, knowing that suffering will happen, that people can move through fear, and that grief can be lightened. And so I even recognize it for my own self. So daily, at some point in time, I do what it's in Sanskrit, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. I may not be saying the Sanskrit right. I apologize for that. But it is, may all beings be happy and free.
That's awesome. Metta meditation is one of my favorite ones to do. So what you're talking about, a version of a metta meditation, is wishing that no suffering, wishing happiness, kindness on somebody that you have a really good relationship with in your meditation. And then you go on and you move on to somebody that, like a neighbor or an acquaintance you know of, but not that well, and you wish happiness and no suffering and peace to them. And then you move on to somebody that you don't have a good relationship with, or may have hurt you, or you just anything like that, and you wish the same things to them, which is usually the biggest breakthrough of the meditation in my personal experience. Right, this is the metta meditation you're talking about. Yeah, and then you wish it to all the universe, all beings in the universe, and it's a very powerful meditation. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't know if you saw my eyes perk up, because that's my favorite ones to do. Because as a male, and I won't talk about this too much, but as a male, compassion, empathy, that kind of stuff, and it's not an excuse because I'm a man, but it's harder for us to tap into that. So when we can, through meditations, it helps to open that up inside of us, open those emotions up in those pathways. So it's one of my favorite things that I'm working on currently. Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I mean, and I think that sometimes, and I want to make sure that I like not crossing a boundary, but what you do for your wife on the whiteboard is metta.
Okay.
You are offering, like, that's so compassionate, the things in which you share.
I never even thought about that. That's awesome.
Right?
Thanks.
That is the offering of for Kat to be happy, and all of that.
Yeah. I'm glad you noticed that. I do put it there purposely so that we all see it all the time. And it changes like once or twice a week. We change it up. So,
Very sweet.
I'm glad you noticed it. Thank you. Now we talked about your biggest, like one of the things you're most passionate about recently. What about a challenge? And it can be a personal challenge. It could be opening up your yoga studio, whatever. What about a challenge you've gone through? How have you dealt with it? And talk about that over the past several years.
Yeah, for me, it's my body. So throughout my life, I've had different interesting challenges with my body, from health concerns, and so growing up, I was asthmatic, right? Like, and back then we had to take Quiberon and was in and out of the hospital for asthma. I'm 50 years old, so just like putting that in perspective.
Doesn't look 50 at all, but she's 50.
Oh gosh, thank you for that. Oh, my foot ungrounded. So no. But so it was that, but over the past 6-7 years, I had a diagnosis of lupus. I have autoimmune diseases, lupus. I have rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, like all stuff that affects how my body responds to things. And as a yoga teacher, not being flexible, right? All the judgment into the head about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't do this pose because my glorious hips are cranky. Or there are days where my hands won't work, right? Like they just kind of clasp in. And so I'm always trying to find ways to hide that. And, like while I'm teaching, they don't need to know that my whole body is literally seizing itself. So that's another reason why I ground myself. Like, spread the skin, Imani, you're okay, kind of thing. So what has been interesting, not just the physical challenge, but the monster in my head, or the roommate in my head that says, you have no right teaching yoga. You do not deserve to be here because you can't do the thing that you're trying to teach. And so what that has, part of my work has been going back to Sutra 1 of the Sutras of Patanjali. And it basically says, and now the practice of yoga will begin, which is all about the quieting of the mind, the chitta. And so I think that the biggest challenge for me is quieting my mind about the judgment I have of my body. Yeah.
Wow. I'm blown away with that explanation, because I never even thought, again, these are things you don't think about until someone talks about it. The fact that you always hear, oh, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga or practice yoga, to which I know you don't have to be flexible, right? We know that, but a lot of people on the outside don't, that want to try it but are, again, afraid.
Yeah.
But I never even thought it from a teacher's perspective that has, arthritis or lupus or anything personally going on that feels, I'm not supposed to be teaching because I can't do these, or I'm not good enough. And that's really interesting, because that can be transformed over to people in business, speakers, activists, all these people that feel that I'm just some random person. I'm not good enough for this. Yeah. Right. So using yoga, meditation, and all that has really helped you quiet the mind, be positive in your mind yourself. And I love that.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean,
awesome.
It is, one of the quotes we're putting on the wall at the new studio, is, the world needs you to be who you are meant to be. Right.
Yeah.
And that's so much of that, right? The world needs me to be a woman in this moment in time that, yes, has autoimmune disease, that teaches yoga and sometimes is in pain, right? And to not shy away from that, because then you can then see yourself reflected back. We're back there, right? The person who refuses to go, if their yoga teacher can't do it, maybe they will then begin to feel comfortable enough to say, oh, well, maybe. Like, it's the what if.
And you're a shining example of that. Like, if you can teach and do it, then with the autoimmune going on, then anybody, almost anybody can. And actually, you are also learning how to teach people who are handicapped, right? Different what do you want to say? Yoga techniques, mood?
Yeah,
What do you
so
want to call it?
adaptive yoga, a lot of times we think adaptive yoga just means sit down in a chair and do something and stretch through the foot.
Okay.
But these are persons with cerebral palsy,
Okay.
traumatic brain injuries, so basically, so let's take, I'll say his name is Chris. Chris has cerebral palsy, has had it, growing up as a child, been within his wheelchair, on and off, in his life for over years. I have to also be mindful of the language around wheelchair.
Yeah. I understand.
But so his hands are so spastic, right, that they close in on themselves. And if you take the joint and you take a joint, and he'll tell you, I won't break, right? Like he's bad, you know what? So you grab the wrist and extend it up. The hand begins to release slightly. And that slight release, he goes, right? That's the yoga. Because we're all trying to find space within our body and space between our thoughts. And so for one moment, Chris is not thinking about his cerebral palsy. He's like, I found space. And that's the grace that yoga brings to people.
That's beautiful. I think this is a great moment for everybody to reflect on how grateful we are to have our health, to be able to wake up and move our hands and type on the keyboard and move this mic around so we can create a podcast. Whereas someone like Chris isn't able to do that, right? So we should be, that's a great moment to reflect on being grateful. And I love reflecting on grateful moments. So thanks for sharing that. And thanks for doing that. What makes you feel like you want to be the one to take those classes and learn that stuff? And what inside of you brings that out?
Well, the opening question of the training was, who are you trying to save?
Yes, there we go. Good.
And for me, broke down in tears. I was like, I didn't know this was going to be about feelings. But I'm always trying to save myself, I guess, in some ways. My husband, whom I just adore, when I got the diagnoses, he said, I'm preparing myself to be able to have to carry you around. I'm like, dude, let's not go there, right? But, right, I'm always trying to think of ways in which to be of service, and just because I see it, it's missing. It's missing right now. And so how can we bring those who are missing from the table to the table? And I think that I would hope, and this may be very self-serving and it's not very enlightened at all, but that if I no longer have use of my hands, that someone will come around, squeeze my wrist, and create some space for me. So that's why.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Your compassion, your empathy and wanting to do that stuff is really inspiring, truthfully. That's awesome. And I talk about that. People ask me, why did you start this podcast? Why are you having people on here like yourself that are going through all kinds of things to help others and mindfulness? And it's the same thing. I just want to, if one person listening is going through that or is experiencing something that we talk about and can take something away from it, then that's why.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, because I'm not making any money on this right now.
Hey,
so
amen. That's most of our lives.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it's the whole, so that makes, we're kind of on the same page
Yes.
there.
Yes. Well, if anyone's ever interested, I don't know how this, but Mind Body Solutions, they're out of Minneapolis. The gentleman that started this, his name is Matthew Sanford, and he's a paraplegic. And after a very traumatizing car accident, lost his sister and his father when he was 13 years old. He's now in his 50s, I think he is. And that's been a part of his work, is to help people find access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Matthew Sanford?
Matthew Sanford in Minneapolis. His book is called Waking. It's open, heart opening.
Oh, Waking? Okay.
Waking. Mm-hmm.
I'll put that in the notes when we finish up. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me pull open a couple other things here. So I did go into, let's talk about, for people that are local and listening to this, we have a new studio opening.
Yes.
And I walked in it today. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful, very warming in there. And it's Saturday is the grand opening. Unfortunately, this won't be released till after that. But yeah, it's True Yoga over on, is it still South Ave? Is that, I don't know.
683 South Avenue.
Okay.
Yes, that weird corner of Gregory and South.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And so going back to Yoga for a Good Hood,
Yes.
I had this written down. I wanted to bring this up. I wanted to talk about this, and then I want to get into the TED Talk a little bit.
All right.
I wanted to actually make sure this was said because I thought it was beautiful when you talked about it. You said wellness should be a civil right, not a luxury. So the whole, everything you've talked about today kind of is wrapped around that idea, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure I brought that up because I thought it was a beautiful way to be said. So now let's go to your TED Talk.
Yes.
I have a question on that. And I think people are interested in that because it's the local TEDx, right? And how often do they come around to do that?
I think they do. The TEDx for the University of Rochester is once a year, but then there's another TEDx for the city of Rochester that happens once a year. So there's two different TEDx's in Rochester. I was at the University of Rochester.
How do you apply for that?
I didn't. They found me.
They found you.
Yes.
You're a celebrity. So we have a celebrity on.
Or infamous, one or the other. Yes.
That's cool. And what is a little bit of the process of what goes on behind the scenes with that, if you want to let us know?
Yeah. So they notify you about 6 to 8 months before the TEDx.
Okay.
And they say, hey, we like that you do this. We want you to talk about it. And this is the theme. The theme for them was what if. And so I was like,
That's literally
that's all they give you.
Okay.
And then they check in with you like once a month and say, so how's your manuscript going? I'm like, it isn't. And then,
That's not what they want to hear.
No. I'm like, tell me what to do. Tell me what to say. And, those kind of things. And they're like, just talk authentically about what your heart is in this project. And then about a month out, you have to give them a manuscript. And then they look at it, and I don't know the reasoning why. I'm guessing they want to make sure that you're not saying something so controversial that could be detrimental to the brand or whatever it may be. But they read it through and they were like, okay, let's go. And then they want to make sure that plagiarism or, like things like that you're not. So they want to look at that.
Yeah.
And then, so for example, like in the TED Talk, I talk about BKS Iyengar. Like they want to make sure it's okay to say this or that. And so they just make sure it's no legal problem, I think.
Makes sense.
And then they start harassing you in a lovely way, almost every day, 30 days out. And then the day of, you sit with your mentor or your curator, they call them, your curator, and they say, okay, let's run it. And then you find out, the day before, you find out you can't use your cue cards. I'm like, what?
Sounds like a lot of practices about that.
Yes. So then you practice that whole day and then you just wait. And they're so kind. Kind.
Have you spoke on stage before that?
Well, every week I guess I speak on stage.
Oh yeah, when you teach, yeah.
Right? Preaching.
Preaching. Yep, that too.
Yes.
I always forget all the different,
all the hats
that you have. Yeah.
So but I'm still actually very nervous each time.
That's what I was going to ask next.
That's why I take my shoes off, to ground myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. Oh God. The nervousness. It has not gone away.
And then how long into it? 30 seconds, a minute, and then you're like, okay, the nerves have calmed down, or do you not even notice it? Just kind of flows.
It begins to there's a little period of blacking out.
Like the memorization clicks in and
but I try to find grounding points of people. Okay. For TEDx, my husband, I know exactly where he was sitting. I could still see the room.
Oh, okay.
And he's my true north. And so I just look over and I see him like buckle down. And then he'll almost know I'm looking at him and he'll just look and he'll go, I'm like, okay, we're good. Okay. All right. Right. Like that's my grounding. And then I can just and then something just opens up.
Okay.
I don't know when it does it. It just kind of opens up. For the TED Talk, I took my shoes off then. I had bought these really beautiful shoes. Oh, they were stunning. And I went to start walking out and I said, like, it felt like cinder blocks on my feet. And I just kicked my shoes off and walked out barefoot.
So you just had this like intuition and just went with what your body was feeling.
Yes.
And I think that's great. Like if we can do that more often throughout a regular day, everyday life, whatever we're feeling, just make it happen.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Have you had a chance to wear those shoes since the...
Oh, yeah.
Of course, you're like, I'm going to make sure I find moments to be able to wear
right.
these.
Yeah. Because they were hot. They were flats with... they were flats, not like heels, but they had this beautiful silver on the toe. So there you go. There's your visualization.
There's my visual of some hot shoes.
Hot shoes.
Awesome. You brought up your husband a couple times.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff do you guys do together that's mindfulness to keep your relationship healthy, spontaneous, passionate, whatever?
Yeah.
I'm interested to know about that.
Yeah. So every morning we don't talk for an hour.
Is that intentional?
Really, intentional.
Yeah.
Like, nope, we're not talking. We study sometimes together. I do read A Course in Miracles, and so does he. And so A Course in Miracles is kind of a something that has bound us together. It's a teaching modality of sorts that, so for example, the opening line of the book is, nothing real can be threatened. Herein lies the peace of God. Like, nothing real can be threatened. So all the other things in which we feel threatened about, like when I'm rattling off in my head and he thinks that I look fat.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. Like, what is that? Right. Like I'm going, yeah.
It's not real.
It's not real. Like what's real is the love in which we share. So whatever is threatening it isn't true. And so we study, or we may choose a book to read together, or he may read a little bit and I'll read it, and then we'll come together. And after that hour, I go, hey babe. He goes, hey. And he, like
that's so cool.
It's just that silent moment. We have had some difficulties sharing those kind of moments since trying to open this new place, because like it's an added responsibility because we got all our other jobs. Mm-hmm. And so we actually talked about this weekend, once I got back in town, going, oh, we need that again. And so we made sure that this morning, like, okay, let's just do the thing.
And what's the purpose behind that? What does that give you guys?
It's something about studying together.
Yeah.
It's like, it also allows us to have conversation about something, right? Like that, in the world of politics where we may have different thoughts on, in the world of, yoga, like he's not a yogi, he's a runner. Oh, okay. And and I'm like, babe, those hips, what you need to do is this, right? Like it's all of those differing opinions. For us to study a book together, or particularly the Course in Miracles, it's something that we can not agree on, but have conversation about that feeds our soul.
Okay.
Right?
Makes sense.
It is about witnessing what's true. And that is one of the ways. Or we'll read Ram Dass, some of Ram Dass's things together. Oh. Or we read The Alchemist together. And it just allows us to have practical magic together. Like, we don't agree on crystals. We were talking about that, you and I. Like, he's like, that's a rock. I'm like, no, it's a magic rock. But these texts that have been ancient are around for so long. Yeah. It's a grounding point.
Wow. I'll use, I've never, the reason I had a probe on that is because I've never heard I've heard a lot of different morning routines, a lot of different things to do in the morning. And I love that you guys choose to do one that's together.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to implement something like that. We'd have to get up really early before our kids start running around. But.
We don't have little ones. We don't have dogs, right? Like, we have cats for a reason. They just go away.
They don't jump on you in the morning when you wake up.
Well, they do.
They do, okay.
Yeah,
but
in their way. Then they go away. They're like, you fed me? Okay, you're done, human. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. This conversation is great. I really appreciate it. Another topic I want to talk about that we haven't mentioned yet is your involvement. And I don't even know if you still do it. I just know by being friends with you and through Catherine that you have involvement with the prison.
Yes.
And teaching mindfulness classes or yoga. I'm not really sure. Yoga. Okay. And what's that all about? Like, where did that come from? Another hat that you wear, another thing, another amazing thing you do.
It's it's actually a part of Yoga for a Good Hood. So Yoga for a Good Hood goes into places where they allow us to go. So I've been at the detention center, and some of my team, the museum, because they work with the school system. I've been in different school districts and the local jails. So these have been just places that I've just been invited into.
I see.
And so the jail has not happened over a past couple of months. Good or bad, they had to move the women from the facility that we were at because of the increase of men and the drop of women. And I only do this yoga work with women. Okay. Not that the men wouldn't benefit, but it's a whole different animal, right? It's one of the reasons why I need more men that are more conscious and trained in yoga. This is a small plug to be able to go into those places, because men in prison need to hear from men in prison, like men going to see them, because it just creates a different dynamic, right? Like, there's no need, whether you think I'm cute or not, for me to take myself in there and create a distraction for you. Now, truth be told, I'm also a distraction sometimes for women. And so you find a different way to handle that, right? And so to eliminate those barriers, so we're not in the jail currently, but I will tell you, it was the best time in my week to go to jail. It really was, because a lot of the women had never had positive touch, and they would comment on that. Like, I would say, may I touch you and adjust you? And some of these women had never had a touch in their life that there wasn't an expectation in return.
Wow.
Right? Like, some of them are in jail because their boyfriends told them to hold drugs for them, and then they get caught and the dude is like, I'm out. And so there's always expectation of them. And so my role when I would go in was, I don't have no expectation of you. I'm here to be of service to you. And some of them never experienced that. I'm hoping that in the new facility, eventually we can go back in, but it's just not conducive as far as space.
Yeah. And the participation in there, women, like, they loved it. They came in. It was...
Yeah. It ebbed and flowed. It really did depend on the population and who. Okay. Like, so if you're in the jail, you're there only like sometimes for 30 days. Sometimes.
Oh, this is stuff I don't, so there's, I have no, even like when you said that they have so many expectations, like, it's so hard for me to even understand that or think about that. Everybody's going through their own stuff. So this is interesting.
Yeah. So the local, we were never in the prison. So the prison, that's sentenced folks.
Ah, I see.
And like, they're there maybe for a year, 2 years, 3 years or more. Mm. At the local jail, they may be there for 30 days. Now, there were some that were there for up to 6 months, and they became like regulars into the yoga class. Cool. But some of them, depending upon why they were there, and again, then you get into the barrier. Like, who are you? And I'm not doing yoga. I don't know you. I can't trust you. Like, it's all that bigness that they get. And I get it, protection. And so I just show up and just smile and go, you come and do some yoga? No, Miss Ma'am, I ain't doing nothing. And I'm like, okay. But, okay, so this is crude. I don't know how crude this is.
Whatever.
Okay.
It's totally fine.
So I go, is anybody having trouble going to the bathroom and you can't poop? And they go, I'm go, I can fix that in one yoga class. And so,
and everybody, right? Okay, here we go.
Like, right?
Once you start talking about things you can fix,
Right.
people, oh, okay,
Right?
that's great.
I'm like, all right, let's
approach.
do some twist to get that going on, because you're getting crap food in jail.
Right.
You're probably not drinking enough fluid. So I got to like squeeze out your intestines. And then the next week that they would come in, they go, man, Miss Ma'am, that really helped. Right?
Participation level goes up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. If you're gonna go to jail, that's probably one of the better situations to be going to jail for, is to teach a yoga class.
Teach a yoga class. Absolutely.
That's great. There's those you probably don't even realize the impact that you have in those little moments in there. And then I always loved it, and I think David G was one of the first people I heard this from, that ripple effect. So you have that impact on that person that's always been had those expectations, and you came in completely dissolving that.
Yeah.
You had that small impact, then they shared that with someone else who shared it with someone else, and then that ripple effect just blows up.
Yeah.
So those little things, if we could all do more of that,
Yes.
the ripples will just be endless and the world will be a better place.
Well, that's why we do teacher training.
Yeah.
Based on your income, right? Like, for that ripple effect, for that very reason. If you only make $600 a year, you're not paying for teacher training.
Right.
I'm going to give it to you free so that you can then give it to someone else. And you now have a marketable skill that you can maybe get a job with.
Ooh.
Right? Like, that's the ripple. Like, I have it. Why should it just be for people who have money?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the ripple that we're hoping Yoga for Good Hood does.
Yeah, and it's just the way it is, right? But the other yoga studios, the ripple effect kind of happens in the suburbs and more, medium to higher medium income people, and mostly white. And so what you're able to do is hit the inner city a little more with that ripple effect of those people, and you never know where that could go, what could happen, who could be the next, pay as you go teacher, trainer. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and these are all things that you just see it from the outside, and until you have a one-on-one conversation, never even realize that all this is why, and this is what could happen, and this is the impact that you want to have. So I love it.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you before you walked in today were like, maybe I hope this comes up, I hope we talk about this, or I want to share this?
I'm officially a grandmother. My son and his girlfriend, Erica, gave birth to Alfonso Lewis. And he is 5 weeks old this week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Holy cow.
He is a love bug. And every time I hold him, or even the memory of holding him, it slows my breathing down. It makes me like blinders to everything else in the world. And that is the meditation practice, right? It for any of us, for myself, what Alfonso does for me is makes things like what's important and what's not, like what is essential. And he's such a gift to them. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's makes so much sense when you say that. I think that a lot of that starts with when you are holding him, Alfonso, that you are being in the present moment and not thinking about past, future, anything else, just being with it, with it meaning the moment, not the person, being with Alfonso.
Yes.
And then you're able to take that on, carry that memory, that feeling on with you. And to relate to that, when I'm putting my son to bed, my daughter too, my son's still a baby, and I'm holding him, and I could have like the worst day, where it's mean like just frustration, nothing's, the work, all that different things. And I can just be holding him, just pull myself intentionally in that moment, and almost brings tears to my eyes at that time. I think just being there, like realizing what the time that I have is so precious with him. And then I want to remember this forever, and everything else melts away. So that makes so much sense.
And that's I never, mindfulness.
Yeah. And I one thing I never do though, is take that moment with me elsewhere. And I need to. So that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, do what I can.
I do what I can.
Do what I can. Yeah.
You're super smart. Have you ever done a retreat, a silent retreat, out of curiosity?
Just privately?
Yeah, like a 3-day seminar.
Oh, I haven't led one, but stay tuned.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yes. Yeah, we're putting some things into the works to take people on a retreat to Arizona, to the Red Rocks. Yeah.
Stay tuned. Don't give out too much info.
No. Stay tuned. Yes.
That's cool.
Yes.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you. This has been a gift for me. Thank you.
Yeah. As you shared a lot, I think a lot of people are going to take a lot away from this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this, truly.
Yeah. I almost want to say namaste.
The light in me honors the light in you.
Namaste.
Namaste.